So here we're on the campus here at the City of St. Jude Catholic Parish. So our mouthful of our legal name. But the City of St. Jude was started in 1934 by Father Harold Purcell, who had formerly been a priest with a religious order called the Passionists. He had been living and working in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and met the Bishop of Mobile at the time, whose name was Thomas Tulin, in a New York City hotel room in 1934, and pitched his idea of building a city of St. Jude somewhere in the South to minister and reach out to African Americans in the Deep South somewhere. And many of the bishops that he had floated the idea to, they weren't open to it, but Bishop Tulin was. And so he asked Father Purcell to come to his diocese, which at that time was all of Alabama and the panhandle of Florida. And Father Purcell arrived in Montgomery in 1934, purchasing a little house over on Holt Street here in Montgomery, which no longer exists. It's just an empty lot now. But that was the first St. Jude location. And he brought with him a couple of priests and some religious sisters to start doing, in particular, medical dispensaries. We have some old pictures of like an old van that they would drive around and do medical dispensaries and medications and things like that in the neighborhood. And then shortly after that, they purchased this property that we're on now. So it's 40 acres in between Oak and Hill Streets on Fairview Avenue. And then there was another about 40 or so acres on the other side of Oak Street that now stretches to the interstate that originally he had bought as well. His dream, though, was to build a city of St. Jude, and city meaning he wanted to take care of any of the needs that people in the community would have. So healthcare was a big motivation for him, also religion, to have a church, also education. And so he, by the time he died in 1952, had raised something like $50 million and then adjusted for inflation just by doing speaking tours all around the country and writing letters to people to build a fully functioning hospital by 1952, a convent for religious sisters, which was on the second floor of the building we're in now, the school on the other corner, and also a rectory and the church, which housed the original school. So the City of St. Jude was founded with that vision, in particular to reach out to the Black community, to provide a source of hope for those who felt like they didn't have any hope, in particular with religion, healthcare, social services, and education. So in the time the march came through, the Summit of Montgomery March in March of 1965, the march organizers were looking for a place where the marchers would be safe. So it was a natural place that the march organizers turned to St. Jude for shelter and help for that. I mean, I think in particular, Dr. King, whose first two children, Martin III and Yolanda, were born in our hospital, but also St. Jude had been the hospital that treated the Freedom Riders who were in need of medical assistance. And so there was already a history at St. Jude of hospitality, but also in particular reaching out and being of assistance to those in the Black community. So I think it just made it a natural choice. All in all, we end up playing host, even though it wasn't without controversy. And in fact, here in our interpretive center, you can find letters, copies of letters on the walls of some of the supporters who had been financial backers of St. Jude from the early days of Father Purcell, who wrote some pretty mean-spirited letters to Father Mullaney in the aftermath of the march, criticizing St. Jude for hosting the march and threatening and also taking their financial support away. Yeah, I think one thing that's pretty obvious to somebody who comes down to the west side of Montgomery, and something that former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and I spoke about when he came to visit last year, is that Interstate 65 really cut the community in half. Not to mention I-85 as well, that went through some pretty prominently Black neighborhoods, which of course is not isolated to Montgomery. It happened all over the country in the selection process. But I think access to the communities, right? Trying to work around the fact that neighborhoods were literally cut in half and severed from each other. I don't know that there's been enough to address the fact that real community was disrupted heavily by the placement of interstates. I'd say the other thing too is economically, you drive out here in the west side of Montgomery, and you're more likely to see a business that used to exist than a business that's functioning. Other than funeral homes, schools, and government entities, you're not going to see other businesses out here. You look at pictures from the 1960s, and there's a vibrant community, right? There's pharmacies, there's services, there's places to get groceries. None of that exists out here now. I would say the other thing too is Fairview in particular, at least this West Fairview, is constructed in such a way as to encourage people to drive faster than they ought to be going. And so it's an incredibly dangerous road. And to think about how many schools there are along this section of Fairview, that's, to me, is concerning, because during the school year when you have kids out, it's not really somewhere I would feel safe as a parent, knowing that my kid could get out on that road as it is right now. The people that I meet that drive the trail and are interested in the history of the place are going by car or sometimes by bike. I think a bike trail is needed for that reason. But I also think easy ability for people who are in a motor vehicle to be able to, first of all, understand where the significant places are that they're looking for, what happened in this particular place, and a safe place to pull over and learn about it, right? So if there's a historical marker, right, is there a place that you can easily figure out where it is, that's not blocked by trees or something, but also a place that encourages you to stop your car and to interact with what you're seeing. But it seems to me that St. Jude played a role not just in Montgomery, but for the whole nation. I think that the role that St. Jude played is something that could be better recognized as playing national significance rather than local significance. This place wasn't just important for one community in Montgomery, right? It somehow has shaped the way that history has gone in the entire country. And yet I think it's a hidden gem that almost no one's heard about. And so I think I would love people to know about it, not just for selfish reasons, but also because it really did change history. The things that happened here changed the world.